Göbekli Tepe, the first temple that rewrote history. The ruins that shouldn't exist. What if the foundation of our history is built on a false timeline? Not a small error. A catastrophic misplacement that ignores a truth buried for over 12,000 years. Beneath the shifting soils of southeastern Turkey lies a structure so ancient, so advanced, and so deliberately erased from memory that its existence should be impossible. But it's real, and it changes everything. Long before Egypt raised its pyramids, before Mesopotamia shaped writing, before any city rose from clay or brick, a forgotten people carved towering stone pillars, aligned them to the stars, and created something no civilization of their time or ours should have been capable of. This wasn't the work of wandering nomads. This was architecture, astronomy, and artistry, performed by minds with purpose. They called it nothing, because by the time we uncovered it, even its name was gone. Today, we call it Göbekli Tepe. Its T-shaped megaliths stretch up like antennae to the sky, each weighing tons, sculpted with animals, humanoid forms, and symbols whose meanings we still debate. It sits on a hill, like a sentinel watching a world that forgot it existed. And strangely, this temple wasn't lost to time by decay or war. It was buried, intentionally, by the very people who created it, sealed under tons of earth as if it were too sacred, or too dangerous to remain above ground. Why would a civilization capable of such brilliance erase its own masterpiece? What secrets were locked beneath the soil, hidden for over 10 millennia? Archaeologists uncovered only a fraction of its mystery. Theories emerged. Fragments of truth collided with speculation. And still, Göbekli Tepe resists our definitions, because it doesn't fit anywhere. It stands outside the accepted arc of human development, an ancient monument built at a time when humanity wasn't supposed to build anything at all. This isn't just an anomaly. It's an affront to the narrative we've been told. It challenges what it means to be civilized, to be human, to remember. So what really happened here? Who were the architects of this forgotten temple? And what forced them to bury the very thing that could have defined them for eternity? To understand Göbekli Tepe is to question everything. And once you see what lies beneath, you'll never look at history the same way again. Chapter 1: The Accidental Discovery. In 1994, the Turkish sun scorched the hillside of Şanlıurfa as it had for thousands of years. To the locals, it was nothing more than barren farmland. A hill like any other. Farmers plowed it, walked it, overlooked it. But beneath that dust-covered mound lay one of the greatest archaeological revelations of the modern age, and no one knew. Until one man, Klaus Schmidt, a German archaeologist with a background in prehistory, decided to look closer. He wasn't searching for a lost temple or forgotten civilization. His goal was simpler: revisit a dismissed site and verify whether it had any real significance. What he found would leave him stunned and ignite a firestorm in the academic world. On the surface, there were no monuments, no statues, no obvious ruins. Only scattered limestone fragments and faint traces of stone poking from the dry earth. Previous surveys had labeled the area as unremarkable. But Schmidt had a hunch. He noticed something others hadn't. The T-shaped stones weren't natural. They had been carved, smoothed, aligned. And as he and his team began to dig, layer by layer, the truth began to surface. A ring of massive stone pillars emerged, perfectly positioned in circular enclosures, some weighing up to 20 tons, standing upright like sentinels from another time. These weren't markers or gravestones. They were parts of an architectural complex unlike anything seen before. Carvings of wild animals, lions, boars, snakes, birds adorned their surfaces with a precision that defied the tools of the Stone Age. And every piece pointed to something sophisticated, something intentional. What shocked Schmidt the most wasn't just the design or the symbolism, it was the dating. Radiocarbon analysis placed the structures at nearly 11,500 years old. That's over 6,000 years before Stonehenge, over 7,000 years before the pyramids. It predated agriculture, metallurgy, and written language. Which raised an uncomfortable question: how could hunter-gatherers, supposedly primitive and scattered, coordinate the labor, logistics, and knowledge to build something of this scale? Göbekli Tepe didn't just challenge the timeline, it broke it. Because if this was real and the science confirmed it, then our understanding of human development was fundamentally flawed. Civilization didn't rise after agriculture. Here, it seemed, civilization came first. And then came the greatest enigma. This temple, this ancient marvel, had been deliberately buried, not ruined by war, not lost to erosion. Intentionally entombed, filled in with rubble and sediment by human hands thousands of years ago. It was as if its creators wanted it hidden, preserved, or erased. No writings accompanied the site. No bones, no tools that might explain its people. Only stones. Silent, standing, impossible. As Schmidt expanded the excavation, more circular enclosures came to light. And with each new discovery, the mystery deepened. Why was only a small portion of the hill excavated? Why was 90% of Göbekli Tepe still underground? What more could be revealed? And more importantly, what was still being concealed? This wasn't just a temple. It was a message from a forgotten world. A world more complex than we ever imagined. And its unearthing marked not just the discovery of a site, but the opening of a door to an ancient truth we had long buried ourselves. Chapter 2. The stones speak in silence. As archaeologists brushed away the soil of millennia, what emerged from beneath Göbekli Tepe wasn't just stone, it was language carved in silence. The megaliths stood arranged in perfect circles, some reaching over 16 feet tall, each weighing several tons. But weight alone wasn't what stunned experts. It was what was carved into them. Symbols, reliefs, and figures, executed with such precision and detail that they defied the supposed limitations of a pre-tool, pre-agriculture people. Animal motifs covered the surfaces: foxes, vultures, serpents, wild boars, rendered in bas-relief, often seeming to move across the stone like frozen shadows. But these weren't merely decorations. They were messages. Codified, intentional. Every creature held significance. Every composition told a story. The symbolism was too layered, too precise to be random. And yet, no one alive truly knew what these messages said. At the center of each enclosure stood two taller pillars facing one another like guardians. Their human-like shapes, bent elbows, stylized hands resting on abdomens, suggested something more than artistic flourish. These weren't totems. They were beings. Representations of people or something else. And yet, they had no faces, no eyes, no mouths. Just presence, authority. As if they weren't meant to be seen as individuals, but as archetypes, watchers, ancestors, deities. More than 200 pillars have been identified beneath Göbekli Tepe, spread across over 20 distinct enclosures, many of which remain untouched underground. Only about 5% of the site has been excavated. And still, what we've uncovered already challenges the boundaries of what we thought Stone Age humans were capable of. How did they move stones this massive without the wheel? How did they raise them vertically and fit them into perfectly level foundations without metal tools? Without pulleys? Without blueprints? How could a supposedly nomadic society, with no cities, organize the labor force to build a project of this magnitude, not once, but many times over generations? And even more perplexing, why? What purpose did these monuments serve? Some archaeologists suggest Göbekli Tepe was a sacred site, a temple for ritual gatherings, a cosmic calendar aligned with solstices and celestial events. Others point to the absence of domestic remains, no hearths, no homes, no trash pits, as proof that this wasn't a place where people lived. It was a destination, a pilgrimage, a memory carved into stone. But another theory lingers, darker, unspoken by most but hard to dismiss. What if Göbekli Tepe wasn't just built by a people with forgotten capabilities, but by a civilization we've never acknowledged? A civilization that left no written record, no lasting footprint, only this encrypted monument to their existence? And what if these stones, with their carvings of animals and humans and unrecognizable creatures, weren't just art, but warning? Some images depict headless figures. Others show strange symbols like handbags, seen later in Mesopotamian and Mesoamerican art, parallels across space and time that shouldn't be there, but are. They echo. They challenge. They whisper of connections we've lost. Each stone is a puzzle. Each figure a whisper. Göbekli Tepe does not speak in words. It speaks in silence. And in that silence, we are forced to confront a possibility that rewrites everything. The people of Göbekli Tepe knew something. Something worth carving into eternity. Something they buried, perhaps not to forget, but to preserve. For us, Chapter 3, The Vanishing Builders. No ruins are complete without their architects. No civilization rises without hands to shape it. And yet, the people of Göbekli Tepe vanished without a trace. No skeletons, no homes, no tools scattered through the site. No pottery, no grain storage, no signature of daily life, only stone. Monumental, intentional, precise, but lifeless. This absence haunts the site more than any forgotten artifact. We do not know their language, their rituals, their customs. We do not even know what they called themselves. What Göbekli Tepe gives us in physical majesty, it withholds in cultural clarity. They are the ghosts of an era too old to reach, yet too advanced to ignore. The official narrative labels them hunter-gatherers, but that description collapses under the weight of their achievements. Hunter-gatherers were supposed to be transient, scattered, focused on survival, not transcendence. They were not supposed to quarry, transport, and raise monoliths weighing 20 tons, align them to the stars, and carve symbols into them with ritual precision. So who were they? Some researchers suggest a pre-agricultural religious elite shamans or proto-priests gathered seasonal bands of people to construct these temples over time. Others posit that a forgotten chapter of humanity once existed, one not unlike our own in terms of social complexity, but erased by time, flood, or war. If that theory is true, then Göbekli Tepe is not a beginning, it's a remnant. A memory. A monument to something that already reached a peak and then dissolved. And then comes the most perplexing act of all, the burial. The builders didn't simply abandon Göbekli Tepe. They buried it. Methodically. With care. In filling the enclosures with rubble, debris, and sediment in a way that ensured the preservation of the pillars beneath. This wasn't destruction, it was concealment, as if they were hiding something sacred, or sealing a chapter they were forbidden to continue. Why would a people capable of such monumental work choose to erase it from view? One theory suggests ritual closure, that the site had served its purpose, and to fulfill a cosmic cycle, it had to be returned to the earth. Another view speculates that an existential threat flood, invasion, a societal collapse forced its guardians to bury it for protection, leaving it to future generations. Not to worship, but to remember. But a more chilling question lingers. What if they didn't want it found again? Because if the builders feared something, whether cosmic, internal, or external, the burial becomes a warning. A message in stone hidden beneath the ground, speaking not to their children, but to us, today. And if that's true, then unearthing Göbekli Tepe may not be a victory for archaeology. It may be a trigger. The unlocking of a truth once deemed too dangerous to endure. The builders disappeared. But what they left behind may be more alive than we understand. Not in flesh, but in consequence, they vanished. But their silence still echoes, in the dust, in the stone, and perhaps in our future. Chapter 4. The burial that preserved everything. Most ancient sites succumbed to time, weathered by erosion, shattered by conquest, consumed by vegetation. Göbekli Tepe defied that fate, not by accident, but by design. Its preservation wasn't the result of geological luck or climate. It was entombed, intentionally buried by the very people who built it. This act wasn't hurried. It wasn't the desperate concealment of a collapsing society. It was a process careful, deliberate, methodical. Entire enclosures filled to the brim with stone fragments, earth, and debris, layer by layer, until only the shape of a hill remained. They didn't destroy their temple. They hid it. And it's this very burial that preserved the site with stunning clarity for over 10,000 years. The carvings remain sharp. The monoliths stand mostly unbroken. The layout survived intact, as if locked in suspended animation. But preservation raises deeper questions. Why hide a place of such monumental effort, cosmic alignment, and spiritual significance? Was the burial a ceremonial closure, ritualistic, symbolic, meant to honor the end of an era? Or was it an act of protection, an urgent attempt to guard the site from some external threat, human or otherwise? The enclosures were not destroyed. There are no signs of conquest, no fire, no structural damage. What we find is reverent sealing, not destruction. Respect, not erasure. And yet, the decision to conceal the site also ensured that knowledge of it would vanish. Generations passed. Myths faded. The temple disappeared from memory, even among those who may have lived nearby. No oral tradition, no remnant folklore seems to reference the temple of Göbekli Tepe, as if it had never existed. The builders wanted it forgotten. Some suggest this was an intentional cultural amnesia, that the society underwent a radical transformation, technological, spiritual, or environmental, that demanded a clean slate. That in burying Göbekli Tepe, they weren't preserving the past, but escaping it. Others argue something darker, that the knowledge encoded in the stone's astronomical alignments, symbolic language, spiritual gateways held meanings too dangerous to survive. And those entrusted with that knowledge made the ultimate choice, to silence the temple before it could speak again. Even more disturbing is this. Similar buried sites have begun to emerge nearby. Karahan Tepe, only recently excavated, shows signs of similar architecture, alignment, and purpose. Is this a pattern? Were there dozens of these sacred enclosures, all intentionally buried at the end of their lifespans? Was this part of a larger, coordinated decision by an ancient network of builders to vanish their own presence? If so, then what drove them to hide their legacy? The burial wasn't an afterthought. It was the final chapter of the temple's purpose. A final ritual, a seal. We are left with monuments locked in stone, hidden by those who built them and revealed only in a modern age that may still not understand their meaning. We see Göbekli Tepe as a treasure of the past. But to its creators, perhaps it was a burden of knowledge, too heavy for their world or ours. Chapter 5: The Forbidden Theories. Official narratives struggle to contain Göbekli Tepe. It's not just old, it's disruptive. And when science hesitates, speculation rushes in. Beyond the boundaries of accepted archaeology, a growing number of researchers, authors, and curious minds have begun to explore the darker corners of this mystery. Theories deemed fringe, forbidden, or outright dangerous to the status quo. And yet, some of them echo possibilities we can no longer ignore. One theory suggests Göbekli Tepe wasn't merely the first temple, it was a memory archive, a stone record of a world-ending cataclysm. Some researchers link the carvings to astronomical events, suggesting alignments with constellations and references to cometary impacts. The vulture stone, in particular, shows strange symbols: a scorpion, a bird, and a disc-like object in the sky. Is it a myth encoded in stone, or a record of something the builders witnessed? A cosmic disaster that shattered an earlier civilization? Others go further. They propose that Göbekli Tepe is evidence of a forgotten high civilization, one predating the Younger Dryas period, when global temperatures plummeted and massive floods reshaped the Earth. In this view, Göbekli Tepe wasn't an origin, but a remnant, a warning left behind by survivors. And the knowledge required to build it wasn't developed in isolation, it was inherited. Even more controversial are theories suggesting contact with advanced intelligence. Not aliens in the Hollywood sense, but entities described in myth and religion for millennia watchers, gods, civilizing agents. The T-pillars, with their arms, hands, and non-human proportions, have been interpreted by some as symbolic representations of these beings. Not humans, but something else remembered. Archaeology rarely entertains these notions. It prefers trowels to metaphors. Yet the consistency of symbolism between Göbekli Tepe, Mesopotamia, Egypt, and even Mesoamerica raises uncomfortable questions. The same motifs, the same cosmic fixations, the same reverence for knowledge guarded in stone. Are these coincidences or fragments of a larger forgotten pattern? The burial of the site is often cited as evidence of cultural transition. But what if it was something else? A decision to suppress a truth too complex, too powerful, or too terrifying to pass on? Theories abound that Göbekli Tepe housed a stargate, that it encoded mathematical principles lost until the modern age, that its builders used sound, frequency, or magnetism unknown to us, that what we've uncovered is only the surface of a structure far more extensive underground. Academic circles reject most of this, and perhaps they should. But history teaches us that forbidden knowledge often becomes accepted truth eventually. The idea of Troy was once myth. So was the idea that Neanderthals interbred with humans. Truth doesn't vanish, it waits. Göbekli Tepe forces us to ask not only what is real, but what we are allowed to believe. And if even a fraction of these forbidden theories are true, then the story of humanity is not just incomplete, it has been rewritten, not by error, but by design. Chapter 6: Echoes in Other Lands. Göbekli Tepe was long thought to be an isolated anomaly, a lone outpost of inexplicable genius surrounded by the primitive simplicity of its age. But that idea is fading. Across the Middle East and beyond, other sites are beginning to whisper the same ancient story. Patterns are emerging. Carvings, alignments, structures, and motifs once thought unique to Göbekli Tepe are now appearing elsewhere, as if its builders weren't alone, but part of something larger. Just 35 kilometers southeast, in the same Turkish region, lies Karahan Tepe, discovered more recently and still under excavation. It contains even more surreal features: massive stone heads, serpentine reliefs, T-shaped pillars similar in style but distinct in execution. Unlike Göbekli, Karahan Tepe includes what may be the earliest known example of a carved human figure inside a ritual chamber. Eyes closed, head tilted back, emerging from the stone like a spirit or god. It raises immediate questions. Was Karahan Tepe a sister site? A school? A sacred complement? Or did it precede Göbekli entirely? Further east, in Syria and Iraq, Lesser-known megalithic circles have been identified, eroded, fragmented, barely noticed. But some share orientation toward constellations. Some include similar animal symbology. And further west, in Europe's oldest sites, like the temples of Malta or the stone circles of Nabda Playa in Africa, the fingerprints of ancient, astronomical thinking reappear. Even across oceans, echoes persist. Mesoamerican structures like Teotihuacan and Andean carvings in Tiwanaku include symbols strikingly similar to those on Göbekli Tepe's pillars: stylized handbags, bird-serpent hybrids, humanoid beings with exaggerated features. Could this be coincidence, convergence, or connection? Mainstream archaeology asserts independent development, that civilizations evolved separately and arrived at similar solutions through necessity. But the coincidences grow harder to ignore. Ancient builders across time and geography were obsessed with the heavens, with sacred geometry, with carving meaning into stone. They encoded knowledge not in books, but in architecture. Not in language, but in alignment. And when seen together, the pattern becomes less about location and more about intent. What if Göbekli Tepe is only the oldest uncovered site, not the first, but merely the first to re-emerge? A visible piece of a submerged iceberg of lost human history? And if sites like Karahan Tepe continue to surface intact, preserved, buried with the same reverence, then we're not dealing with an isolated event. We're witnessing a reassembly of a shattered past. Even linguistically, ancient root words trace back to forgotten proto-languages that hint at common origins. Oral traditions in various indigenous cultures speak of knowledge keepers, sky teachers, flood survivors, legends long dismissed as myth, now recast under a new light by what we're digging from the ground. Göbekli Tepe is not a solitary voice. It is the first thunderclap of a storm rolling in from antiquity. Other voices are rising. Stones are speaking. Patterns are converging. And as each new site is unearthed, we must ask, how far back does the human story really go? And what if the truth was never lost, just waiting for us to remember it? Chapter 7. The Legacy Buried Beneath Us. We once believed that the human story began with the plow. That civilization emerged only after the taming of nature, the rise of agriculture, the invention of writing. But Göbekli Tepe shattered that myth. It whispered another version of history, one not told in textbooks, one carved in stone, then buried by its creators. The implications stretch beyond archaeology. If advanced spiritual, architectural, and astronomical knowledge existed over 11,000 years ago, before agriculture, then our modern civilization is not a beginning, it's a continuation, a rediscovery. A return, that changes everything. It means knowledge is not linear. Progress is not guaranteed. And history is not a straight line, it's a spiral. Rising, collapsing, buried, then remembered again. Göbekli Tepe may be the keystone of a forgotten chapter, but it also serves as a mirror. It reflects a humanity capable of deep meaning and cosmic vision long before cities, kings, and empires. It forces us to rethink what primitive truly means. Intelligence is not exclusive to modernity, and perhaps wisdom wasn't either. The silence of its stones compels us to listen, not just with science, but with humility. We may be the descendants of survivors, not pioneers, heirs to a legacy buried in the soil and scattered across continents, waiting to be reclaimed. The true story of Göbekli Tepe isn't only about its builders, it's about us. Our refusal to look deeper, our discomfort with uncertainty, our instinct to cling to familiar timelines. But as new sites surface and evidence mounts, we are confronted with an undeniable truth. The past is far bigger, far older, and far more complex than we imagined. And if Göbekli Tepe was hidden to be revealed at the right time, then that time is now. The future of our understanding lies not in the next invention, but in the next excavation. Not in conquering space, but in uncovering memory. We dig not for ruins, but for ourselves. This is the legacy buried beneath us. One that refuses to remain silent. One that stone by stone is rising again.